You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
You're listening to Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater, your Niagara source for all NCAA football news, weekly betting odds, game analysis, race for the college football playoffs, and reactions to the AP Top 25 rankings. Here are your hosts, Brandon Caputo and Trey Patterson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first installment of Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater of the 2021-22 NCAA football season, right here in the Armchair GM Sports Network, your August 7th, 2021 edition, your source North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. You can find us on social media for updates and giveaways by following the podcast on Twitter at Armchair GM Pod, as well as liking us on Facebook and Instagram. You can listen to us on many audio platforms, including Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Deezer. Wherever you're getting your podcasts at, we are available for you. And now, of course, as you can see, in beautiful video form. So if you're liking the stuff on the YouTube side of things, make sure you're hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, and hitting that bell icon for all updates on videos when they are released on our YouTube channel. With that said, our beautiful user-friendly website, armchairgmsports.com, for all things regarding the network, including articles, podcast episodes, sponsors, and contributors. Everything's on there for you guys in any new mobile-friendly version of the website as well. As always, I'm one of your hosts of Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter right underneath there at Caputs13_AGM. And I'm very pleased to welcome back to the network after a very long layoff with the college football season getting ramped up again. He is the one and only Trey Patterson, producer and co-host for Fox Sports Knoxville on The Blitz, and also a contributing writer for the Tennessee Vols. Since Trey has been last on the network, he has joined the Fox Sports Knoxville team as a producer and co-host for that show that I just mentioned, Trey. So welcome back and congratulations to your new position there.
Hey, appreciate it, man. Good to be back. You know, if you hear my voice, that means one of two things. Either we're going to have some bad baseball opinions or it's time to talk about college football.
Yeah, now we get to see your beautiful face in video version for the first time. So usually on the radio side of things, but on our network, you got the face for video as well.
I don't know. I've always been told I have a radio face, but we'll see. We'll see if the viewers go down.
So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, this will obviously be an audio version as well. But for you viewing on the YouTube side of things, for today, as you can see by the thumbnail, we're going to be discussing the power conferences in NCAA football. We're going to start off here with the Big 12, and there's a lot of news going on with this conference. So in next week's, expect the Pac, the SEC, and the ACC conference previews as well, so make sure you're
Pac-12, Big 10,
yeah, and the
ACC
Big 10 as well.
SEC.
Yeah, the Big 10. I almost forgot about them because I'm thinking about the Big 12. That might not be a conference much longer. So, in today's video, obviously, we're going to be discussing the Big 12, and we might as well start off today, Trey, with the Big 12 in general. Is this conference even going to be a thing moving forward? So, we obviously had the big bombshell a few weeks ago that there were talks about Texas and Oklahoma moving moving to the SEC. And there's been news, and there's been a lot of traction regarding this. So what do you think is going to happen with this, Trey?
Well, if you just want a short and concise answer, I think the answer is no. The Big 12 will not be a conference, and I give them 2 years. I know that Texas and Oklahoma are technically contractually obligated to be with the Big 12 until 2025, but I don't see that happening. I think this is the last season that Texas and Oklahoma will play in the Big 12 before they officially make the jump to the superior conference, the SEC.
As somebody who follows the SEC, Trey, definitely it's going to be something with that. But I mean, if Texas and Oklahoma leave this conference, those two are the two biggest names. And then, Kansas having a great basketball program, they've been rumored to be going to the Big Ten if that's the case. So what do you think the rest of these teams are going to do, Trey? Do you really think that this might be one of the last times we ever discuss a Big 12 season preview here? Or do you think that there's any way that this conference can survive without Texas, Oklahoma, and maybe Kansas on the basketball side of things?
I really don't. I don't see any way they come out of this unscathed. Texas is the most profitable university when it comes to athletics in the country. So profitable, in fact, that they have their own Longhorn network partnered with ESPN, which now they're going to be doing away with that because they're going to be a part of the SEC network. So no longer are they in need of a Longhorn network. But Texas, and I would even say Kansas, maybe more so than Oklahoma, has been keeping the Big 12 alive, just because Kansas rakes in all that money from basketball. But yeah, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, those are the two big powerhouse schools from that conference, especially football related. There's just no way that the Big 12 will be able to financially support themselves after that departure.
And it's definitely interesting. So we'll see what happens with Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, and Trey, the other big thing about this move is the buyout that they'll have to pay to do something like this. I think that's an astronomical amount of money to want to get out of a conference. I mean, what is it, $75 million each?
It's 76 million per school, and I mean it's a lot of money. They'd be able to pay it. They're not gonna pay it. So the 76 million is what they would have to pay if they break their contract with the Big 12, and that contract means that they have to stay in the conference until 2025. But there's a whole lot of other stuff going on behind the scenes about the conference, going to dissolve. Kansas talking to the Big 10, Texas Tech possibly talking to the Pac-12, and other schools starting to branch out and look elsewhere. The conference is going to dissolve before 2025. So Texas and Oklahoma, even though they have said that they're going to finish out their contract, they have no intentions on doing it. They just haven't said it publicly. But in the same hand, if the conference dissolves, you don't have to pay that money. There's nobody to pay the money to because the Big 12 no longer exists.
Yeah, so they might be able to wipe their hands clean of that with kind of that scenario happening. And from the SEC side of things, Trey, it was, correct me if I'm wrong, it was unanimously decided from SEC teams to allow Texas and Oklahoma to join the conference.
Yeah, so anytime there's expansion in the SEC, you have to get a 75% approval vote from the SEC's board of directors, so one person from each school. And really the only school that was leaning towards voting no was Texas A&M, because there's like a big standoff between them and Texas. Texas A&M wanted to be the only Texas school in the SEC. But Greg Sankey, I do think he's the best commissioner, or not commissioner, but best commissioner, not just in college athletics, but probably in professional athletics too. And he just signed a new extension with the SEC today too, by the way. But he got everybody on board. If anybody was upset and didn't want to vote yes, that would have been something they would have discussed, again, behind the scenes and not made public. Because when you brand yourself as a superior conference, you got to have everybody in agreement. You can't have people voting no on one thing and others voting yes. It makes you look weak from the outside. So, yeah, everybody voted yes, even if they might not have wanted to.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird scenario. And again, we've been talking about this off the air for a while here. Do you think that this move for Texas and Oklahoma, it might give them more, I guess, notoriety being in the SEC, but realistically, I mean, the SEC being the most difficult conference as far as football goes, do you think that being the biggest fish in a medium-sized pond of the Big 12 is better than being a mid-sized fish in the biggest pond when you're going over to the SEC?
I don't think that this move will benefit Texas the same way I think it'll benefit Oklahoma. In that sense that Texas right now is a contender year in and year out in the Big 12. Their only real competition is Oklahoma, and then some years you have other schools, outliers that we'll get into later, I'm sure, when we do previews, but like Iowa State's going to be a contender this year. In the SEC, the top half of the conference can be considered contenders. I mean, LSU, Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Mizzou's considered a contender this year. Arkansas is on the way up. Ole Miss has one of the best offenses in the college football, and especially in the SEC. So there's a lot more competition that Texas isn't going to be used to. And Texas right now, as well as they've recruited, they're still about an 8-4 team playing in the Big 12. If you're an 8-4 team in the Big 12, you're about a 6-6 team in the SEC. Now Texas is a brand; they're one of the best brands in football, so they're always going to be able to recruit. They have the landscape out there to recruit all of Texas. I mean, they're going to have to compete with Texas A&M now more so than they probably were before. But they're always going to be able to recruit. They're going to be they're not going to fall and become like a Vanderbilt or a Kentucky or South Carolina or anything like that. But they're going to struggle at least for the first couple years.
Yep. So it's going to be interesting to see if and when, or more so when, that move is made and what is going to be to had with this conference. Again, it might be one of the last times that we're going to be previewing the Big 12 as as one of the big conferences in college football, or if it's just going to be no more and dissolved after a few seasons. So
yeah, I mean, if I had to put money on it, I would say this will be the last football season the Big 12 has, and it'll disband after basketball and before baseball season ends in the spring.
Are you going to be sad to see this conference go, or are you kind of just on the fence anyway? Either way,
I will be sad to see it go. I'm like, I don't really like change a whole lot, I guess you could say. And then not only that, but the history of the Big 12 and the rivalries there, and just like the style of play that the Big 12 has, it's different from everywhere else. The Big 12 has always been known for high power, high octane offenses. And you don't really get that with a lot of other schools. And now with, the possibility of everybody leaching out to different conferences, it's changing the way college football is played. It's almost like it's no longer college football, but like a minor league for the NFL, especially since players can get paid now, which is another thing I guess we can briefly speak on, because that was some pretty big news. Probably, according to some, it's probably bigger news than the Big 12 dissolving, is that players can now get paid.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard much about this, but it's called NIL, name, image, and likeness. And essentially, players can make money off of their own name. So if you go to, say, Texas University or University of Texas, and there's a car dealership there that says, hey, if you sponsor my Mercedes-Benz dealership, we'll give you $100,000. That's now illegal, which is huge news in the world of college football. But on the same hand, it's making it kind of feel like it's more of a minor league NFL than the traditional college football.
Yeah, and the college football video game as well coming back. I think that was a big thing as far as being able to get the likeness and the names from the players, and not just having it be made up people like it was, in the mid 2000s there.
Well, it wasn't even made up people. They used the real people. They just didn't use their names. So like if you played in like NCAA 2011 and you went and played as Auburn, there would be a 6'6" black guy behind center and number 2, and you'll go, oh, who's that? It's Cam Newton, obviously, but it's going to have some fake name, and not going to say Cam Newton, but if you go and look at the stats, oh yeah, that's definitely Cam Newton. They just aren't using his name.
Yeah.
But EA already announced that they are bringing back the college football game. All that's really left now is getting licensing done with all of the schools and universities so that they can use their logos, their stadiums, stuff like that. Just a lot of the legal paperwork left, but the video game is coming back. It's been confirmed.
Yeah, that'll be fun, as you and I, I'm sure, will be definitely interested in getting that game. But we'll see if the Big 12 is going to be in that game by the time it comes out. Probably not. We'll have to see.
No, probably not.
So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break on the show today. We're going to come back and discuss the betting odds for the Big 12 and just kind of recap the conference from last year and get Trey's thoughts on what he expects from might be the last season that we see of the Big 12 football. So it better be a good one. So stay right here. I'll be right back on the Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater and right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, serving traditional-style Italian pizzas made with the freshest, top-quality ingredients. Loaded subs and their famous chicken wings. Winners of the Reader's Choice Diamond Award 4 years running from Niagara this week for Best Pizza and Wings in Niagara Falls. Home of the best tray and wing combo in town for the price and quality. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., located on the corner of Drummond Road and Dunn Street. Available for call-ahead pickup or delivery at 905-374-4400. Make sure to like them on Facebook and view their website for their menu at carminespizzeria.ca. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano. Way too good. As we all adjust to this new world that we're living in today, masks are now mandatory, and Niagara's own Custom PPE is Canada's leading face mask provider. Visit them online at customppe.ca and choose between several mask options with different colors and sizes. Add your organization, company, or team logo so you make your face masks unique. Available to purchase online 24/7 at customppe.ca and shipped within 1 week. They have the best prices and quickest turnaround in Canada, and no order is too big or too small. Also offering custom floor stickers as well as face and counter shields for your business or workplace. Visit customppe.ca and use the code Armchair at checkout for 20% off your custom or blank face mask today. Custom PPE, Canada's leading face mask provider. Attention job seekers, if you are currently looking for work in the Niagara region, you owe it to yourself to check out the services provided by the Niagara Employment Help Center, located at 6100 Thoroldstone Road, Niagara Falls, directly across from the Camisos Plaza. Their free services include resume and cover letter writing, community resource and referral information, local labor market information, job search strategies, assistance with clarifying employment training and career goals, employment counseling and job search support, second career information and registration assistance, and all their services are currently provided by appointment only. So give them a call at 905-358-0021 or visit their website at ehc.on.ca, the Niagara Employment Help Center. This Employment Ontario program is funded by the Government of Ontario.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to segment 2 of today's Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater. Brandon Caputo and Trey Patterson of Fox Sports Knoxville back with you here. And guys, if you're enjoying the video version of the podcast, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, smashing that bell icon, and liking us for all updates regarding any new episodes that get posted on the network, on the video side of things on YouTube. So hopefully you guys are enjoying that. So with that said, let's get into segment 2 and going to be talking about the teams in the Big 12, players coming up in the final segment. So with that said, let's take a look at last year's player awards tray. And just quickly going over this, Matt Campbell was actually named the Big 12 Coach of the Year for the third time in 5 seasons with Iowa State. When you think of the Big 12, Trey, you definitely don't think of an Iowa State head coach winning the award for best coach in the conference 3 out of the last 5 years. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that's there's a reason that Matt Campbell was the hottest name on the market this past offseason. Tennessee went out and tried to hire him. A few other schools did as well, but he was set in stone. He was adamant. He was not leaving Iowa State. He's built a foundation there. I think he likes it because this is probably not fair to say, but the expectations there aren't as high as somewhere like a Tennessee or an Auburn or somewhere like that. So, I mean, he can temper the expectations, and he's winning and doing a good job recruiting well too. He's definitely deserved it. Matt Campbell quickly becoming one of those top-tier coaches in college football.
Oklahoma's won the most individual awards in the 25-year history of the Big 12 with 47. Kansas State is second with 35. Texas at 31. Oklahoma State at 21. Baylor 19. Iowa State 19. TCU 10. West Virginia 9. Kansas 8. And Texas Tech 8. So with that, let's talk about the award winners from 2020. Offensive Player of the Year was Breece Hall from Iowa State, the running back there, sophomore. Defensive Player of the Year was Mike Rose of Iowa State as well, so Iowa State took both of those awards. He was a junior linebacker. Offensive Newcomer of the Year was Xavier Hutchinson, as well from Iowa State, a junior wide receiver. Defensive Newcomer of the Year was Tony Fields II, a senior linebacker from West Virginia. Offensive Freshman of the Year was Deuce Vaughn from Kansas State, a running back. Defensive Co-Freshman of the Year were Oh my God, Azim Young from Iowa State, of course, defensive back, and Kari Coleman, defensive lineman from TCU. Special teams player of the year was Treston Ebner from Baylor. He was a kicker slash punt returner from senior. Offensive lineman of the year was Creed Humphrey from Oklahoma as a junior, and the defensive lineman of the year was Darius Stills, the senior from West Virginia. And like we mentioned, Matt Campbell, in his 5th season, won the award for best coach for the 3rd time. Was there anyone that stuck out to you, Trey, from the Big 12 last year from any of those award winners?
Not in particularly, I don't think. It was a weird year last year with all the COVID rules and only playing conference games. It just it didn't feel normal, I guess, and in a way, maybe it was in part to the COVID season and in part with how bad Tennessee was last year. I just, like, for the first time probably ever, didn't pay attention as fully as I normally do. But I mean, I think you said Breece Hall. You mentioned him. He's a stud. I think he's on the watch list right now for best running back, not just in the conference but in the country, coming back. And then Matt Campbell. We already touched on him. I'm really high on Matt Campbell. I think he might be the best coach in that conference. I'd probably put him ahead of Lincoln Riley at this point.
Crazy to me, Trey, that no Texas player, one Oklahoma player, which was an offensive lineman, and no Oklahoma State player on this list, which when you think about the Big 12, those are the 3 teams as far as football goes that you'd usually think of, along with Iowa State, who's kind of had a good last couple of years as well. But, you know, for Texas, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State to have a combined 1 winner of an award last year, it goes to show just how weird of a year, like you mentioned, that it was in the Big 12.
Yeah, it was. It was a crazy year, and good for a lot of these players. They got a chance to showcase their abilities by only playing conference games. I think actually though I think the Big 12 did play one non-con game at the beginning of the year last year, because I think Oklahoma State even lost theirs to like some lower tiered school. But it was just a weird year, and I know myself and a lot of the people, especially around Knoxville, where I live now, are really excited to get back to a normal college football season.
Yeah, so 5 Iowa State, I guess, members, if you count Matt Campbell as the coach, taking the awards last year. So it was a pretty incredible season for Iowa State. We'll see if they can kind of reclaim that as well this year. So let's take a look at the Big 12 betting odds for this year, Trey. Got it up on the screen for the YouTube viewers. Oklahoma is the favorite at -130. Iowa State is actually second at +260. Texas coming in at third with +450. And then it's a complete drop-off. You've got Oklahoma State, TCU, Baylor, Kansas State, West Virginia, Texas Tech, and Kansas at the rear, all at +1,200 or more, Kansas being at +25,000. So Oklahoma, Iowa State, and Texas are the 3 teams that look like are going to be the contenders this year as far as the betting odds go. But what are you thinking from the betting odds currently for the Big 12?
About right, I guess. I'm looking at it right here. The one that stands out to me as maybe like good value on a team might be Oklahoma State at +1,200. I don't see TCU, Baylor, Kansas State, West Virginia, Texas Tech, or Kansas even coming close to competing for the Big 12 championship. Maybe West Virginia, but I think they're in year 2 or 3 of a new coach. So I wouldn't reach out on them at +5,000. I think Oklahoma State at +1,200 is good value, but getting Oklahoma at -130, that's still really good value at that. I mean, that's betting $130 to win 100. I mean, that's almost even money. So I mean, I'm really not shocked at any of these odds. I'm not even shocked that Iowa State's ahead of Texas, to be honest. That's probably where I would have put them. I'd maybe move Texas down a little bit to maybe like +300, +350. So you can even find good value in Texas at 450 there. But ultimately, in the end, I do think this is Oklahoma's conference to lose.
And if we look at the standings from last year, Trey, I mean, Iowa State, they won 5 awards. There's a reason for that. They went 8-1 in conference play, 9-3 overall. You had Oklahoma in second, Oklahoma State third, Texas back and forth after a hot start. So, I mean, Kansas was 0-9 and overall 0-8 in the conference. Do you see Kansas at least being a little bit better with that?
No. Something else we didn't really touch on with Kansas was the whole Les Miles scandal that happened. Les Miles, who took over the job at Kansas, was fired, and rightfully so, for covering up sexual assault allegations while at LSU that were uncovered at his time at Kansas. But apparently, it was known behind the scenes, and they hired him anyway. So, yeah, not a good look. I can't remember the name of the guy that Kansas hired to replace Les Miles, but if anything, it's going to get worse.
So stick
And
to
I know, how does it get worse than 0-8 or 0-9? By going 0-12, because
so
you're back to a full schedule this year.
so if you're a Kansas fan, stick to basketball, I guess.
Yep.
So if you're a betting man, Trey, off of last year, I mean, we just went over the betting odds. You are a betting man at some sorts. Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Texas, TCU. How do you think that it kind of shapes out this year with the top five? What would be Trey's top five this year for the Big 12?
If I'm going in order of how I think it's going to turn out, I believe it will be Oklahoma 1, Iowa State 2, Texas 3, Oklahoma State 4, West Virginia 5.
Oklahoma 1, Iowa State 2, Texas 3.
Oklahoma State 4, West Virginia 5.
Okay. West Virginia at 5. All right. So you think Oklahoma gets back there this year with Spencer Rattler and kind of gets things back on track? Because Texas and Oklahoma, I don't know who was more disappointing, but they both had times during the season where one of them would lose and you'd be like, wow, okay, the other one's going to take over this conference. And then the other one would lose a really bad game. And then you'd say, oh, I don't think either of these teams want to win the conference. And neither of them did. Got to give credit to the Cyclones. They had a really solid season.
Iowa State finished on top for the regular season. I believe Oklahoma won the conference championship game.
Yep.
So I still think Oklahoma won the conference technically, but when you're looking at the standings, Iowa State's on top. Just because they had a better overall conference record. That doesn't take into account the conference championship game.
What do you think has more validity as somebody who follows college basketball very in-depthly? Would you go based
college
off
football, you mean?
Or college, what did I say?
You said basketball.
Oh, well, you watch college basketball too, but as far as college football, do you put more merit into the standings of the conference or the actual game itself, which can sometimes just be a crapshoot?
Well, see, the Big 12 is weird in this because up until 2 years ago, they didn't have a conference championship game because they're the only conference where every member in the conference plays each other. It used to just be whoever came out on top in the conference was the one who won the conference. But then they realized that was hurting their chances at making the college football playoff. So they added the conference championship game. So right now, this is probably solely just for the Big 12 because this is the way they've done it. I'd put more stake into the standings because that shows they played every team in their conference. It's not like the SEC where you miss out on playing 5 teams each year. They played everybody and they finished on top. The conference championship game in the Big 12 right now just seems kind of redundant.
Yeah, it definitely does, considering, Oklahoma ended up winning it after a disappointing season that they had. So anything else you want to mention about this conference and the teams in general before we move on?
No, I mean, I think we kind of touched on it. I really like Oklahoma this year with Spencer Rattler. He's the Heisman favorite right now going into the season. It's going to be tough for anybody, I think, to catch Oklahoma. Oklahoma came out of the gate stumbling last year. I think they lost 2 of their first 3. I don't expect that to happen this year.
And you mentioned about the lack of defense in this conference. Do you think that a team like Kansas State or Iowa State, if they can, as notoriously better defensive schools than most in this conference, do you think that there's any way that they
TCU has a really good,
and TCU, the Horned Frogs
as well.
Yes, the Horned Frogs shut down Texas last year. Thanks for reminding me of that. But do you think that there's any way, like you mentioned, that somebody can stop one of these high-powered offenses and kind of give Oklahoma a run for their money here?
Well, Texas is always going to be a candidate for that just because it's a rivalry. And, big rivalry games, usually it doesn't matter how good one team is and how down the other is. Usually it's just, those two go head-to-head and it's a dogfight the entire time. So I think Texas is a candidate for that. Iowa State and Oklahoma is going to be a really good matchup. I'm not sure who Oklahoma's not out of conference opponent is. I'm going to find that real quick. But usually they play a big out of conference school, because last year they were supposed to play Tennessee before the conference only thing went into effect. But yeah, out of the teams in there, I think it's Oklahoma, or that can stop Oklahoma. I think it's Texas just because of the rivalry, and then Iowa State, and then maybe like TCU might be able to stop them enough to like make them not look normal, but it won't be enough to win the game.
And the Red River Showdown this year is going to be on October 9th at the Cotton Bowl Stadium, Trey, in Dallas, Texas. So that's always the biggest game of the conference to look forward to. And with the conference moving, obviously, with them both moving to the SEC, it looks like obviously they're going to continue that. But do you think it's going to be as meaningful now going to the SEC as it was in the Big 12? It's the premier game every year. It might not be the premier game in the SEC when you look at the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Auburns, like you mentioned, the Iron Bowl. So do you think that the Red River Showdown kind of gets a little bit diminished if they go to the SEC because it's not the main game of the conference like it is in the Big 12 every year?
I don't think so. The SEC has a lot of really good rivalries that aren't, nationally relevant, I guess. I mean, obviously you have the Iron Bowl between Alabama and Auburn. That's probably the biggest rivalry in football. But you also have rivalries like the Arkansas LSU, which is a really good rivalry. It's the battle for the shoe. You have the Egg Bowl between Mississippi and Mississippi State. That's, in my opinion, better than, like, in terms of competitiveness, it's probably better than Alabama Auburn. It just doesn't have the star power. But that's one of the greatest rivalries in all of college football. And now you can throw Texas and Oklahoma into there. You get Texas and Texas A&M back. Oklahoma and Missouri are back again. I think this only adds to the competitive spirit of the SEC, and if anything, it'll make the rivalry that much more important.
Okay, so we'll see if this is the last year of the Red River Showdown in the Big 12. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick last commercial break. We're going to get into Trey's thoughts on some players to watch from the Big 12 this year for that conference. So stay right here. We'll be right back on the Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater and our Big 12 conference preview right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network.
Experience a new way to play daily fantasy sports and esports on Thrive Fantasy. Thrive's game concept revolves around player props, which are simple over-unders on player stats. There are contests for traditional sports including the NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, and cricket, as well as esports titles including CSGO, Dota 2, League of Legends, and more coming soon. Here's how to play. Choose your lineup of over-unders for top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Each prop has a fantasy point total based on how likely it is to hit. The more points the selection is worth, the riskier it is. Rack up the most points and win a share of the prize pool. Thrive is awarded over $2 million in cash, so come and prop up today.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the final segment of our Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater. Brandon Caputo and Trey Patterson back with you here. And again, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, smashing that bell icon, and liking us on the YouTube side of things for all updates on videos that get released on our YouTube channel and see our glorious faces in video form moving forward on the podcast as well for you audio listeners if you like to just listen to podcasts as well. So with that said, Trey, let's finish off today's Big 12 conference preview by talking about some players to watch. We went over in the last segment the winners from last year, but go ahead and just talk about, I got it up on the screen here for the video viewers here, about the players that are projected to be in the running for most outstanding player and most outstanding defensive player, so the Maxwell Award and the Chuck Bednarik Award. So again, if you're a college fantasy football player or I guess junkie, what would you be looking at as far as some of these guys to watch here for, I guess, the player of the year? And Breece Hall is back to try to defend that title.
Yeah, so I think the obvious choice right out of the gate is Spencer Rattler, the quarterback for Oklahoma. He had some pretty lofty expectations going into last year's season, but it's hard to really quantify last year's statistics with the way COVID kind of changed everything. They weren't able to practice like normal. You only played your conference opponents. You didn't get any out of conference games. No stat padding games, as a lot of people like to call them. So I think it's Spencer Rattler first and foremost. I think he's the favorite to win the Heisman. Pretty sure he's the favorite. And he struggled at the beginning of last year, but really got into a groove as the season went on. And I expect him to just continue that pace. Outside of that, I think you got Brock Purdy from Iowa State. He might be the better pro prospect. Not might be. He is the better pro prospect when it comes to quarterback position than Spencer Rattler. He does his job. He's the definition of a game manager who goes above and beyond what a game manager does. So I think Brock Purdy, it would be second for me, followed by Breece Hall to defend the title. But when you got Breece Hall and Brock Purdy in the same backfield, it's going to be a scary offense. So I think those three are the ones who really stand out for me. Deuce Vaughn, I remember following his recruitment a little bit for Kansas State. I think he could play a factor at the running back position in that conference, but playing for Kansas State, I think, might hold him back just a little bit.
Yeah, so if you were a betting guy, would you say that one of the two Iowa State guys, or do you think that Spencer Rattler for Oklahoma would be your pick for the Heisman, or not the Heisman, but the most outstanding player in the Big 12?
I would go with Rattler just because I think with Oklahoma winning the conference, I think that'll give them the edge. It's kind of like the winning effect. Like they're more likely to give the award to somebody who won the conference than somebody who didn't.
Especially a quarterback, right? The most important position.
So I'd give the edge to Spencer Rattler, but that's not to discredit Brock Purdy or Breece Hall at all. I think they're both fantastic players.
And moving on to the defensive side of things, Trey, I know the Big 12, again, isn't the most known for their defense, but is there anybody that sticks out to you on the defensive side of things here that is going to have your eye this year for the most outstanding defensive player? A couple of Baylor players on this list as well, which we haven't seen a lot from Baylor, at least in any of the rankings or projections.
Well, it wouldn't be a college football video if I didn't take a dig at Texas, so I got to go and say that Texas is missing a player on this list because he decided to transfer to Tennessee, and that's Juwan Mitchell, Texas's leading tackler last year at the linebacker position. So
he left the better orange to go to the uglier orange. It's okay.
He just wanted a head start on SEC play.
Sure.
But no, outside of that, Dante Stills from West Virginia is a really good player, really good prospect in the NFL. A big, beefy boy is like what we like to say on the radio. When talking about these big interior linemen. So Dante Stills, Colin Schooler from Texas Tech, or Schuler. It might be Schuler. I'm not sure. I remember hearing a lot about him. But as far as it's hard with these defensive guys because, like you said, the Big 12 is not really known too much for their defense outside of like a couple schools maybe. But Big 12 is known for having like games that end 60 to 63, somewhere around along those lines. So I don't really have anybody who sticks out to me like I did on the offensive side. But Dante Stills is a name I'd watch out for. I think he has a chance to work his way into a first-round draft pick.
Do you think that there's anybody from the Big 12 that you think is in the I guess, conversation for not only the Heisman, but to be a first-round draft pick in the NFL? Or is there anybody that you're looking at here that might be able to improve their NFL draft stock? I mean, Spencer Rattler is obviously the one sticking out of the page, but is there anybody here that you might project as a first-round talent in the NFL?
I think Brock Purdy has that potential. I think he has the potential to not only be a first round pick, but a top 10 pick. Like when after the football season's over and you get into the talking season, I think he's the kind of guy who could work his way up into those camps where, you know, how Gruden used to have his QB camp during the summer. I think he's going to be one of those guys. And if he has another good year, I mean, watch out. He might work his way into top 3 territory.
So anything else you want to mention about any other
Spencer
players?
Rattler's only a sophomore, so he can't come out yet. But I don't know if he translates very well to the NFL. He's kind of plays a lot like Kyler Murray, and I mean Kyler Murray's making it work, but not everybody can play like Kyler Murray. There's a reason that he went first overall.
And again, the running backs aren't typically taken very high. There's a few outliers, but do you think Breece Hall, if he does win the award this year again for the second year in a row, do you think that he would be in consideration as a first-round pick in the NFL, or do you think that just for the disrespect as far as running backs go, because, you know, there are so many of them that are available that they usually get taken in the second or third round, do you think that there's any chance that he can rise his draft stock into being a first-round talent, or do you think that his skill set is just not going to be translatable to being, you know, an Ezekiel Elliott-type pick at the top of the draft?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think he's a day 2 guy when it comes to the NFL. It's just with the way the NFL treats running backs now, they're so expendable. Unless you got a guy like a Najee Harris, who was definitely the best running back coming out last year. He didn't get drafted till the mid-20s when the Steelers took him
from Alabama, the most notable school in college football.
Yeah, so I see him as a late second round, early third round pick right now. I think he could go out and, you know, win the Heisman, and I still don't know if he'd move up into the first round.
Do you think if he played in the SEC on a bigger school that might help, or just in general you just don't think that he would have been a first round pick regardless of him playing on Iowa State?
Yeah, I don't think it matters where he plays. Everybody knows how good he is, but I just don't think the way he plays, I don't think it translates to what somebody would be willing to spend a first round pick on.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Derrick Henry. He wasn't even a first round pick.
Yeah, I guess he's working pretty well for your Tennessee Titans, huh?
But yeah, just because he's not a first round pick doesn't mean he's not going to make it in the NFL.
Yeah.
It's just the way the draft goes now. He's just not the prototypical first round selection.
But his teammate Brock Purdy might be that because he's a quarterback, right? And his type of style might translate better to the NFL. So with that said, Trey, any final thoughts today before we wrap up the Big 12 conference preview?
Horns down, baby. I'm just.
You really had to give it to me on my show with my team, didn't you?
I had to dig once. Don't worry, you'll have your time when we do the SEC. Tennessee's not any better.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you guys enjoyed our first installment of the conference previews for the NCAA football season for 2021. We'll be back with you guys every week for the rest of the power conferences, and I'm sure Trey will have some pretty salty thoughts on his Tennessee Volunteers this year. He's going to be fired up for that. And
we're talking a lot about Tennessee now on the radio. We have an app if you want to listen to me, 10 to 12, Monday through Friday.
Yep, go ahead and plug it, Trey. Go ahead.
Fox Sports Knoxville. Download the app.
Yep. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater, our first of the 2021-22 NCAA football season, right here in the Armchair GM Sports Network, your source North American sports coverage by sports fans for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. As always, I'm one of your hosts of this podcast. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter at Caputs13_AGM with a Canadian Z, and as well, you can follow my co-host Trey at Trey Patterson. Make sure you're checking him out at Fox Sports Knoxville on the Blitz, as well as a contributing writer covering the Tennessee Vols over there. So he's going to be doing a lot of stuff going into the season, and his favorite time of the season is NCAA college football season. I'm sure he's prepped up to return to tailgating for Tennessee Vols games as well.
Best time of the year, man. Best time.
Big thank you to all of our great sponsors who help put us on Sports Network, keeping the show on the air, and to you viewers out there and NCAA football junkies here in Canada for tuning in and listening along for this episode. Once again, this is the Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater on the Armchair GM Sports Network, and we'll see you guys again next week. You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.